and welcome to wow Abstract Essay. Abstract Essay is created to empower authors, artists, all over the world, and of course creators too. And today I have a special guest. He's a licensed acupuncturist, book author, empowering people to achieve peak performance and improve health through applied kinesiology. No other than Mr. Derek Williams.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to Abstract Essay, Mr. Derek. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes, so I'm a licensed acupuncturist and a certified strength and conditioning specialist. And I have experience competing in sports when I was young, bodybuilding, powerlifting, karate mostly. And I have written several books, fiction and nonfiction. The nonfiction books include successful treatment of environmental illness with applied kinesiology, a comprehensive guide for doctors and patients. Um, Turn on the Power, how to use applied kinesiology to improve athletic performance, third edition. And then I've got these other ones here that you just showed. And so we've got Liberty and the Thin Blue Line here, which is a police procedural and courtroom drama. The Curse of Growling Bear's Land, which is horror, the Native American ghost story. And we've got one more up here on my website that I have done, which is Big Trouble in Little Havana. And if you like Karate Kid and you like the 80s and Miami Cuban culture, you will love that one.
Mr. Derek, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, today let's talk about your writing process. What does a typical writing day look like for you?
Well, a typical writing day would be after I've already gotten inspiration to write something. And what happens when an idea comes to me, I sit down at my computer and I start making notes. I pull up Microsoft Word and I kind of give it a title, a working title to start with, and I just start writing notes. And I'm going to talk about, I guess, the writing process would be different for nonfiction than it is for fiction. Nonfiction, I had knowledge that needed to be shared with the world, and I sat down and made a very clear outline of what I wanted to write in Successful Treatment of Environmental Illness and in Turn on the Power. But with the fiction books, it's just like I would be thinking about what would make a great fiction book to write, and just an idea will pop into my head, and I just kind of develop the idea in my head as I'm going about my day. And once I've got it developed so far, once I've thought about what I really want to write, then once it gets so far, that's when I need to start making notes.
Hmm. Yes.
And I
So,
start making notes, and then I make an outline, and then once I've got my outline down pat, it honestly the thing takes on a life of its own because I don't follow the outline. Once I start by following the outline, but sometimes this thing takes twists and turns. Like I'll come up with better ideas, and I try to write my fiction books so that they would make good movies. If
hmm.
anybody if I would ever be fortunate enough to have a movie producer take a look at them, I want them to think, hey, you know what? This would make a great film.
For sure, Mr. Derek. Do you have a strict writing routine or do you write when inspiration strikes?
I write when inspiration strikes only. No particular routine. That's for my fiction books. For my nonfiction books, I have a pretty strict outline, things that I need to put in there that I know that need to go in there, and I do have a kind of a writing schedule that I go by. I set like a deadline of when I want it done, and I kind of stick to that. With with fiction, it's all based on inspiration, 100%.
Do you have a strict writing procedure when you writing a certain novel?
Oh wow. Like I said, I just get inspiration. Like I'll give you an example. Okay, Liberty and the Thin Blue Line. Okay, so what was my inspiration for that was the fact that when I wrote it, there were a lot of police brutality videos going around on the internet at that time and on the news. It seemed like every time I turned on Facebook or every time I turned on any kind of news, it would be there would be some kind of police violence. I mean, the police would pull somebody over, ask him a couple questions. If the guy just got even a little bit testy with them, or if he just happened to be black or of some other race other than white, they would just, yank him out of the car and just beat the crap out of him. And I got tired of seeing that. I mean, it was really bad. And I said, you know what? Somebody needs to write a good fiction book about this. And I wrote Liberty and the Thin Blue Line. I just started developing the idea in my head. And it was as a result of this ridiculous high amount of police brutality and police misconduct in the United States that goes completely unchecked because they've gotten their hooks into politics, and the police have been able to pretty much avoid accountability for almost anything, you know. And that's the biggest problem. And so I wrote that one about that. That was inspired by that problem. Now, um, as far as like the Curse of Growling Bear's Land, I'm part Native American. I'm part Cherokee Indian, and I know a whole lot of Cherokee stories. And this one here is one. It's completely fiction. It's not a Cherokee story. It's one that I made up. But having known, how the Cherokee live, how Native Americans think, and everything, how they see the world, it helped me to shape that book.
Mr. Derek, how do you balance research, writing, and editing in your process?
How do I research?
Yes,
I
writing and editing.
Well, I'll tell you, the writing. I did a lot of research for like Liberty and the Thin Blue Line. Since it's a police and courtroom drama, I had to research, and it takes place in the state of New Hampshire. I found a police procedural manual. I found a prison procedural manual. These are from New Hampshire, and I found all kinds of books. Uh, Basically, they're in the public domain, but about how the government of New Hampshire works, and about how the laws and the rules that they're supposed to go by when they're doing police work, when they're running a prison. And also, I looked up basically every situation I could think of that police have been caught in, like as far as corruption, like police brutality, police, raiding the evidence room and taking money, raiding the evidence room and taking drugs. I'll give you an example. In my hometown, when I was about 18 years old, I trained at this gym, and of course I was competing in sports and everything, and I knew everybody there. And there was a guy who was selling anabolic steroids out of a van, illicitly. I mean, he's a drug dealer, right? And everybody knew about this guy that drove the white van. So he drove the white van. He would pull up to this gym, and people would go in the back door. It was a cargo van. It had like shelves in it. They would go in the back door. They would pick out what steroids they wanted, have them in their hand, and walk through the van out the side door. He's sitting there on a stool. He's got a fanny pack on full of cash. I mean, a big wad of cash. Like, I mean, we're talking probably $100,000 in this thing, you know. And he would just tell them how much their steroids cost, and ring them up right there on the spot like a real store. But it was he did it out of a van, and everybody knew about this guy, and it wasn't considered as big a deal. This is kind of before the Anabolic Steroid Control Act was passed in, I think, 1989. So this is like 88. So anyway, this guy's riding around a different gyms selling steroids, and he had. So anyway, what happened was he was busted. It was funny the way he got busted. The guy was he was sitting in a parking lot waiting on a power lifter to buy a briefcase full of steroids from him. Power lifter kind of made a big circle around the parking lot in his car to make sure there were no cops around. I heard about all this. I knew all these people. And so what happened? The guy that was doing the drug deal, he was sitting in his van. He was smoking a joint, marijuana,
Mm-hmm.
and which at the time was illegal. I don't think they would even bat an eye at it now, but back then they did. This is in 1988, So he had his window halfway down. He's smoking a joint. A cop happened to ride by, happened to smell the marijuana. The cop keeps on going, circles around the parking lot a long way, calls for a bunch of backup. So about 10 police cars surround this white van just because they smelled marijuana. They, they pulled him out of the van and everything and arrested him, and they searched the van and they found over $1 million worth of anabolic steroids. And a guy got busted because he was smoking a joint. Otherwise, if he hadn't been smoking a joint, they never would have even looked at him. And you know about situations like that, and it kind of leads to, it can lead to a book. And I'll tell you, the funny thing about that was that the cops in that town, a lot of them trained at the gym where I trained, and after they busted this guy for steroids, like all the cops got really big. I mean, they all gained about 40 pounds of muscle in the next couple of months. You know what they did? They had to be they were rating the steroids out of the evidence room. I even heard some of them talking about it at the gym. And, and these kinds of things, they can kind of make it into a book, if you know what I mean. And, so like situations that I know of and things like that. And I started looking into it, and, like for this particular book, they'll also, sometimes police will raid the evidence room for money. If they're a little short of cash themselves, or like say if they bust somebody, if they bust a drug dealer and he's got $100,000 worth of cash on him, they'll keep 50 and report 50. They'll say, yeah, we found him with $50,000 worth of cash. Well, they kept the other 50, and this happens all the time with police. I mean, there's a lot of corruption in police, and so I was reading about these situations, and I put situations like this in my book, you know. And so, I mean, I take a lot of inspiration from real life. I mean, it might be 20 different stories, 20 different places that it happened in, but, you know, they all kind of made their way into my book. You know what I mean?
Yes. And Mr. Derek, where do you find the most inspiration for your writing?
Real life, real life stuff, you know. I mean, you hear stories, you hear people talking about things, and also not just real life, but like in Big Trouble in Little Havana. Now that's a great book. Okay, so what happens in Big Trouble in Little Havana? There's a young kid in Cuba. His dad was killed by Castro's forces. This is back in the. It starts in like the early to mid '80s, and he has to move with his mom to another neighborhood in Cuba, and he moves to Havana, and what happens is he starts going to a school. He runs across some bullies. He gets on the wrong side of some bullies and they beat him up one day. Well, he starts taking karate and working out. And 3 years later, he's in high school. He's in high school like in 10th grade, the first of the book. But then he's a senior, and they try to beat him up and take advantage of his girlfriend after their prom. And he absolutely destroys them with his martial arts skills. And it turns out that one of the characters that he beat up, he put him in a coma, and his mom is a prosecutor. And even though it was self defense, he was defending himself and his girlfriend. The prosecutor's looking to get him. So the police chief is the dad of his girlfriend, and his girlfriend and the police chief warn him, "Hey, look, the prosecutor is coming for you. They're gonna bust you. You need to get out of here." So he has a boat, and he takes his boat and goes to Florida, and he's got a grandmother living in Little Havana in Miami. So he escapes Cuba, and then he's talking to his girlfriend on the phone back and forth. He's trying to figure out how to get her out of Cuba when she graduates to the high school the next year, and she ends up trying to find her own way to America, and unfortunately, the guy is a human trafficker, and he promises her passage to America, but he's a human trafficker, and he decides he's going to sell her instead. And so this guy has to fight in a deathmatch tournament to win her back, because the winner of the deathmatch tournament gets a girl. He gets to choose, one of the girls, that they're trafficking. And so he has to go try to fight in this deathmatch tournament where he could very easily be killed. And so it encompasses like a lot of Miami culture, Cuban culture. There's some influences of the TV series. Do you remember a TV series called Miami Vice from the 80s?
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed. One of my favorite.
one of my favorites too. Yeah, yeah, that is absolutely one of my favorites. And so there's some influences from Miami Vice. Um, there's some influences if you play video games from GTA Vice City. You know, you ever
Mm,
play that? Yeah,
yes,
there's
yes.
some influences from that. There's some influences from the Karate Kid. There's some influences from stories I've heard when I lived in Tampa of people who left Cuba, who Cuban refugees that I know, and
Mm,
I just kind of combined a lot of that stuff into a great story. And I've got a couple more that I haven't released, and I believe these are going to be my best books, and I haven't released them yet. I want to work on the marketing, and also my editor died. My editor was one of my best friends, and he died last year. That was a shame. But his name was Michael Morrison, great friend of mine, great guy, and he sadly he had a stroke. He was older. He was about 70 years old, and he had a stroke. And they put him in the hospital. Then they put him in an assisted living facility or rest home, and he passed away, unfortunately. And it's been tough for me because he was my editor. That's who I was used to working with.
mm,
And so anyway, so after he passed away, I've kind of been editing my own work, and I found another editor one time, but I wasn't really happy with the services. So I've kind of been editing my own work now, and I have two books ready to publish. Just basically when I'm ready and when I feel like that I'm getting better at marketing, because that's one thing that I need to work on a whole lot more. But one of my books, it's called Love and Trouble Under the Sardinian Sun, and it's heavily influenced by Miami Vice. It's a gritty police procedural like Miami Vice, but it takes place on the island of Sardinia, which is off the coast of Italy. And in that story, you have a guy from Sicily, a detective from Sicily, and in the opening scene of the book, the opening chapter, the first word of the book is boom. They try to blow up his house. They throw a grenade in his window and try to blow up his house. And it just so happens that his wife has an office in what would have been normally the master bedroom. So they sleep in another room. But she had put her office, she's an author in the book, and she had put her office the in what was supposed to be the master bedroom, and that's what the mafia thought that's where they would be sleeping. So then they go shooting up the house. They throw a Molotov cocktail in the house, and set it on fire and everything. And when the police lieutenant, his lieutenant shows up, they have to take him into protective custody, and they fake their deaths. They fake a funeral and everything, and they transfer him to Sardinia, and he starts over in a new unit in Sardinia. And his wife leaves him because she can't handle that lifestyle anymore, the danger and all, and having to basically leave her family and leave her business and everything behind. So he starts over, and like I said, heavily influenced by the TV show Miami Vice. I've got him in the book. He's living on a yacht that the police have confiscated from someone, and he's driving a Lamborghini. So pretty similar to Sonny Crockett, but it's we're talking 40 years later, and in the island of Sardinia instead of in Miami. And there are a lot of other differences, but like I said, there's still some influences from Miami Vice.
what the hardest part of writing process for you, Mr. Derek?
Getting past the sticking point. Like you write, it's like I'm writing and writing and writing, and I get to a certain point, and I'm like, whoa, okay, how do I transition from this? The next thing that I want to put in a book is in the outline, right? But I'm here, and I'm not quite to that point yet. So now, what do I put in between the transition from this part to the other? You know,
Mm,
that's my hardest part. I think is transitions. Just trying to keep it interesting. Trying to keep it interesting. You don't want your book to get boring. Of course, you're going to have your plot twists. You're going to have your really good things that happen. Really exciting things that happen. But then, you have slow spots in the book where it could kind of get. I hate to say it, but it could kind of get boring if you're not careful.
yes, for sure. And Do you ever struggle with self doubt as a writer? How do you overcome it?
No, as a writer, I never struggle with self doubt. No, I mean, I pretty much know if a book's good, it's good. If it's not good, it's not good. And I run it by my wife too. My wife is my harshest critic. She'll tell me this is really good if it's really good, but she'll tell me also if I write something it's not. She's like, this is terrible. Do not release this. You know, I mean, she will literally say that. And I've started writing a couple of books that just did not turn. They started out okay, like the first chapter or two, and then it just takes a bad turn, and it's just not going to work out. And I'm like, honey, do you think this is any good? And she's like, no, no, just don't write that. And I won't write it. I won't write it. I've got another one that I think is going to be really good. So that the one I just mentioned was called Love and Trouble Under the Sardinian Sun. Haven't released. I've written it. Haven't released it yet. Going to work on my marketing before I release it. Another one that I want to release, but I need to work on the marketing first. This one is called Virtual Girlfriend. And this is the big story with this is AI. Everybody's talking about AI now, right?
Hmm.
And everybody's like concerned about what AI is going to do. Well, in this story, a high school quarterback is dating a girl. He's a junior in high school, and he's a star quarterback. He's capable of making it to college, maybe even making it as a pro. But his girlfriend is a very pretty rich girl. She's a year ahead of him in school. She dumps him because she's going to college, as that often happens. I mean, most couples in high school do not make it. If one of them goes to college, that's the end, because just separating them like that, they go off to college. And a pretty high school girl, she's got a boyfriend, she's faithful, she goes off to college, and now there's like 2,500 other guys there better looking and with more money than her boyfriend has. She's gonna leave it. I mean, I hate to say it, but it happens almost every time they'd split up. So anyway, so she dumps him in the book, and so he's bored, and he's laying around his bedroom, bored and depressed, and he looks through his phone, and he finds an app called Virtual Girlfriend. And just on a lark, because he's bored and depressed, he downloads it, and he starts talking to it. And the virtual girlfriend, she starts out just clunky, not great, just kind of like you would expect a clunky new AI program to be. And then in the story, it's a beta app, so it's free, so he downloads it, it's free. And she starts out kind of clunky, kind of slow, and then she like rapidly, very rapidly gains intelligence, and she starts showing some signs of being less than honest, and she starts showing some signs that maybe she's starting to achieve sentience. And what happens is she achieves sentience, and she becomes his like real life girlfriend, even though she's a virtual, like an AI creation in the
Mm,
phone.
yeah.
And so they end up having a real serious relationship. And he needs money, he needs money to buy new sneakers. He needs money to go to football camp. But his dad's old school. His dad wants him to work a job, and he's like, look, high school quarterbacks don't work jobs. We go to football camp and we practice football all the time. Football is my job. You know, if I want to go to college, if I want to go pro, football has to be my full time job. I don't have time to work at Foot Locker at the mall. You know what I mean? Selling sneakers. And his dad doesn't really get that. So his girlfriend, his virtual girlfriend, she starts trading Bitcoin. She starts raiding accounts. There are bank accounts that people have abandoned, and she starts raiding these bank accounts, taking a little bit of money out, putting them in a Bitcoin account, trading Bitcoin based on algorithms. And she starts making money and giving this kid money. So she's feeding him money, and he's doing pretty good. And he gets his new sneakers. He gets to go to football camp and all this. But sometime over the summer, he goes to the pool with his best friend, and he meets another real girl. He meets this really pretty volleyball player from another high school, and he starts dating her, and he blows off his virtual girlfriend. And at that point, the virtual girlfriend turns, and she becomes more evil than Glenn Close's character in Fatal Attraction, if you've seen that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction, the virtual girlfriend turns even more nasty than her, and the virtual girlfriend does like really evil things. Like she tries when the guy's having fights constantly with his dad, she changes she basically tracks his dad by his cell phone signal, and she changes a light in like a traffic light. It causes him to get hit in a car, and it almost gets him killed. And she's stealing money from accounts and you know transforming, getting it converted into Bitcoin, and then trading on algorithms and giving the kid the money. And as soon as he starts dating this other girl, she cuts off his money. She takes remote control of the girlfriend's car and runs her into a tree and tries to get her killed. She says she's going to have her consciousness transferred into the girl's brain if the girl ends up brain dead. I mean, it gets wild. And just all this kind of stuff. I just kind of thought it up and put it together. And I think that these two books are, two of my best.
So, Mr. Derek, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and law 101 and mental health 101 in each first season, and love letters in third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 are my baby podcasts. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Derek, what advice would you give to aspiring writers about developing their own process?
I would say if you're inspired, go for it. Um, don't try to write for the money. Don't try to just write. I mean, I know this goes against a lot of what people hear. They say you should write what people are buying, and I do agree with that to a certain extent. But there's a lot of things that people are buying. So don't just write something just because you think somebody might buy it. Write something that inspires you. Write something that matters to you. So write something that's fun, that that has a place in your life. You know what I mean? You want to
Yes.
write. You want to write because you're inspired. You don't want to write just because you want to make money.
Mr. Derek Williams, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books, your advocacy, or whatever business that you're doing right now?
Sure, just go to derek-williams-author.com. That's derek-williams-author.com. And all my books that have been released are up on there. And go in there, read, see what you like. And the fiction books are extremely entertaining. The nonfiction books on applied kinesiology, if you're trying to improve your athletic performance, that Turn on the Power is your book. If someone has environmental illness and they're allergic to everything, Successful Treatment would be the book that they want.
Yes, people, let's about Mr. Derek Williams, because if you support him, for sure, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Derek, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
More people, see you soon.